The mimosas at Ocean View Country Club tasted particularly bitter that Sunday morning, though whether that was the champagne or the conversation topic I couldn't tell. Our family's monthly brunch had become an institution since Dad retired from his law practice. A chance for the Chin family to maintain appearances while dissecting each other's life choices over Eggs Benedict. "Claire, sweetheart, you're looking tired," Mom observed with practiced concern, adjusting her pearl necklace as she studied my face. "All that travel for work can't be healthy for someone your age." I was 32, hardly ancient, but Mom had a gift for making my international consulting work sound like a dangerous hobby rather than the career that had quietly made me one of the youngest property investors in the state. "She's fine, Patricia," Dad said, cutting his Belgian waffle with surgical precision. "Claire's always been the restless one. Some people need constant stimulation." My brother Ryan looked up from his phone, where he'd been scrolling through real estate listings with the intensity of a treasure hunter. At 29, Ryan had perfected the art of ambitious mediocrity, big dreams, small execution, and an unwavering belief that success was just one opportunity away. "Actually," Ryan said, setting down his phone, "I wanted to talk to everyone about opportunities. I've been working with Janet Morrison. You remember her? She handled the Henderson's estate sale, and she's identified some incredible investment possibilities." Janet Morrison materialized at our table as if summoned, her real estate blazer immaculate despite the 90-degree heat outside. She'd been hovering near the restaurant entrance for 20 minutes, clearly waiting for her cue to join our family discussion. "Good morning, everyone." Janet beamed, settling into the empty chair beside Ryan with practiced ease. "I hope you don't mind me joining. Ryan asked me to bring some documents for your review." She opened her leather portfolio and spread papers across the white tablecloth like she was dealing cards. Property assessments, market analyses, and what appeared to be transfer documents created a fan of legal forms between the fruit salad and coffee cups. "As Ryan mentioned, the current real estate market presents some unique opportunities," Janet continued smoothly, "particularly for families looking to consolidate assets and maximize investment potential." Dad leaned forward, his attorney instincts engaged despite being officially retired. "What kind of consolidation are we discussing?" "Well," Ryan said, his excitement building, "Claire owns those 3 properties she's never around to enjoy. The beach house sits empty most of the year, the downtown condo is just a tax write-off, and that mountain cabin might as well be a money pit." I set down my mimosa carefully. I wasn't aware my properties were up for discussion. "They shouldn't be sitting idle," Dad said with the authority of someone accustomed to making pronouncements about other people's assets. "Ryan's got a solid business plan for developing the beach property into vacation rentals. Much better use of prime real estate." Janet nodded enthusiastically. "The vacation rental market is absolutely booming. Ryan's projections show potential returns of 15 to 20% annually." "Returns on what?" I asked quietly. "Your properties," Mom explained as if I'd missed something obvious. "Ryan's found investors willing to partner with the family. We could turn your little real estate hobby into actual profit." My little real estate hobby. The 3 properties they were casually redistributing represented 8 years of careful investment, strategic purchases, and property development that had quietly built me a portfolio worth over $2 million. "The beach house alone," Ryan continued, pulling up photos on his phone, "could be transformed into a luxury rental destination. I've already spoken with contractors about renovations." "Have you?" I said. "The timing is perfect," Dad added, reaching for his reading glasses to examine Janet's documents. "Claire, you're always traveling anyway. These properties are wasted on someone who's never home to appreciate them." Janet slid a set of papers toward Dad. "I've prepared preliminary transfer documents. Obviously, we'd structure everything to maintain family ownership while optimizing the investment potential." Dad picked up his pen, the Gold Cross pen he'd carried throughout his legal career, and began reviewing the forms with professional attention to detail. "This looks straightforward," he murmured, making notes in the margins. "Claire's name comes off the titles, properties transfer to the family trust. Ryan manages the development projects." My phone buzzed against my purse. A text message from an unknown number. "Property registry monitoring alert activated. Any unauthorized transfer attempts will trigger immediate legal response." I glanced at the message, then at my family's confident faces as they planned my financial future without me. Dad continued his document review while Ryan outlined his grand development vision. I sipped my mimosa and watched this surreal performance, marveling at their complete confidence in a plan built on entirely false assumptions about my business acumen and legal preparedness. The beach house renovation budget would be about $200,000, Ryan explained, his voice gaining momentum with each detail. New kitchen, updated bathrooms, maybe add a deck overlooking the water. Janet says we could charge $3,000 per week during peak season. And the downtown condo? Mom asked, clearly enjoying her role as family investment advisor. Perfect for corporate rentals, Janet chimed in. Tech executives, visiting consultants, business travelers who want something nicer than hotels. Very reliable income stream. I pulled out my phone and discreetly opened my property management app. The beach house, my beach house, was currently generating $4,000 per week through the luxury rental management company I'd contracted 6 months ago. The downtown condo housed a rotating selection of international business clients who paid premium rates for the privacy and amenities I'd carefully curated. Ryan had no idea he was proposing to develop properties that were already operating at peak profitability. Claire, Dad said, looking up from his document review, I need you to initial these transfer forms. Just a formality to get the trust restructuring started. What exactly is being restructured? Your properties will transfer into the Chin Family Investment Trust, he explained patiently. Ryan becomes the managing partner for development projects. I'll handle the legal oversight, and you'll receive quarterly distributions based on performance. Quarterly distributions from my own properties. I almost laughed. Janet's already identified potential buyers if we decide to sell instead of develop, Mom added helpfully. The beach house alone could bring in $800,000, maybe more in this market. $800,000. My property appraiser had valued it at $1.2 million just 3 months ago, and that was before the waterfront renovation I'd completed in April. I'm curious, I said, accepting Dad's pen. What happens to the existing rental agreements? Ryan waved dismissively. Whatever little arrangements you have can be terminated. We need clean slates for serious development. My little arrangements included a 2-year contract with Prestige Property Management, exclusive agreements with 3 corporate housing companies, and a waiting list of international clients willing to pay premium rates for access to my carefully curated properties. Dad's phone rang. He glanced at the caller ID and frowned. Chin and Associates Law Firm? I sold that practice 2 years ago. He answered with his professional voice. Thomas Chin speaking. Yes, I understand. What do you mean ownership verification? No, I'm at brunch with my family. I watched Dad's expression shift from confusion to concern as the conversation continued. Janet Morrison began organizing her papers with slightly less confidence than she'd displayed earlier. Legal challenge to what? Dad continued into the phone. I haven't signed anything yet. Property registry alerts? I don't understand. My phone buzzed again. This time it was Dr. Amanda Foster, my real estate attorney. Claire, our monitoring system detected attempted property transfers involving your assets. Are you authorizing any changes to your portfolio? I texted back. Currently watching family attempt to redistribute my properties without my knowledge. How quickly can you respond? Legal team is 5 minutes away. Keep them talking. Dad, Ryan said impatiently, who's calling? We need to get these documents signed before the country club's afternoon rush. Dad ended his call looking genuinely puzzled. That was strange. Someone from my old law firm says there's been a legal challenge filed regarding property transfers involving our family. Janet's professional smile flickered. Legal challenge? That seems premature. We haven't filed anything official yet. Actually, I said, still holding Dad's pen, I think we should wait on the signatures. I'd like to review these documents more carefully. Claire, don't overthink this, Dad said with the tone he'd used when I was 7 and refusing to eat vegetables. This is a family decision. We're all in this together. Through the restaurant's floor-to-ceiling windows, I could see a black sedan pulling into the country club's circular drive. 3 people in business suits emerged, moving with the purposeful stride of legal professionals on a mission. Besides, Ryan added, it's not like you know anything about real estate development. This is what family is for, helping each other succeed. The hostess approached our table. Excuse me, is there a Ms. Claire Chin here? There are some people who'd like to speak with you. Dr. Amanda Foster appeared at our table with the commanding presence of someone who'd spent 15 years dismantling fraudulent real estate schemes. Behind her stood Marcus Webb, my property management partner, and Detective Sarah Kim from the Financial Crimes Unit. Ms. Chin, Amanda said formally, we received alerts that someone might be attempting to forge property transfers involving your portfolio. Dad's fork stopped halfway to his mouth. Janet Morrison went completely still, her hand frozen over the transfer documents. Forgery. Dad said slowly. There's been some misunderstanding. These are family asset transfers. Detective Kim stepped forward, badge visible on her belt. Sir, are you Thomas Chin, and were you about to sign documents transferring properties owned by Claire Chin? She's my daughter. I have every right to. Actually, Amanda interrupted, opening her briefcase, you don't. Ms. Chen's properties are held in her name exclusively, with no co-signers, liens, or family trust provisions. Any attempt to transfer ownership without her explicit written consent constitutes property fraud. Ryan found his voice first. This is ridiculous. Claire doesn't know the first thing about managing real estate investments. Marcus Webb smiled coldly. Ms. Chin owns and operates one of the region's most successful luxury property portfolios. Her beach house alone generates over $200,000 annually in rental income. The silence at our table was deafening. Mom's coffee cup clattered against its saucer. 200,000? Dad whispered. Her downtown condo averages $18,000 per month in corporate rentals, Marcus continued. The mountain cabin is booked solid through next summer at premium rates. Ms. Chen's properties represent approximately $2.4 million in assessed value. Janet Morrison began quietly gathering her documents, clearly calculating her exit strategy. Furthermore, Detective Kim added, we've been monitoring Ms. Morrison's activities for several weeks. This appears to be part of a pattern of targeting successful property owners through family manipulation. Pattern? Mom echoed faintly. Ms. Morrison has been involved in 11 similar schemes over the past 2 years, Amanda explained. She identifies wealthy individuals whose families are unaware of their success, then convinces the families to authorize property transfers for fraudulent development projects. Dad stared at the pen still in his hand like it had become radioactive. Janet, is this true? Janet's professional smile had completely disappeared. I think there's been a significant misunderstanding about my business practices. The misunderstanding, Detective Kim said firmly, is your assumption that property fraud wouldn't be detected. Ms. Chen's portfolio is protected by automated monitoring systems that alert law enforcement to any unauthorized transfer attempts. I finally spoke, my voice calm despite the chaos around our table. The properties you were planning to develop are already operating at maximum profitability. I've been running a luxury rental business for 4 years. Ryan's face cycled through confusion, embarrassment, and dawning comprehension. Claire, you're actually successful? Extremely, Amanda confirmed. Ms. Chin is one of our firm's most sophisticated clients. Her property management strategies are frequently used as case studies for other investors. Other brunch guests had begun staring at our table, drawn by the presence of law enforcement and the increasingly animated conversation. The country club's usual atmosphere of quiet elegance had been replaced by the electric tension of a criminal investigation unfolding over Eggs Benedict. I need to make a phone call, Janet said, standing abruptly. Ms. Morrison, Detective Kim said pleasantly, I'm afraid you'll need to come with us for questioning. We have some documents we'd like you to review. The handcuffs appeared with professional efficiency. Janet Morrison's arrest made the local business journal's front page Tuesday morning. Local realtor charged with property fraud scheme detailed her manipulation of 11 families over 2 years, with estimated damages exceeding $8 million. Her real estate license was permanently revoked. The investigation revealed forged documents, fabricated property assessments, and a network of shell companies designed to launder stolen assets. Dad faced professional embarrassment when news reached his former law colleagues. Retired attorney nearly defrauded own daughter, became a cautionary tale about family assumptions and due diligence. Ryan's development dreams evaporated along with his confidence. Learning that his unsuccessful sister owned a multi-million-dollar property empire while he'd been struggling to secure basic apartment rentals was a humbling revelation that took months to process. Mom's Bridge Club received detailed explanations about my little consulting business, international property acquisition for high-net-worth clients, with a specialty in luxury vacation rental development. The most satisfying moment came Thursday when Pacific Business Weekly called for an interview about successful young entrepreneurs. The article, Building an Empire, How Claire Chin Created a Luxury Property Portfolio Before Age 35, featured photos of all 3 properties Ryan had planned to improve. The country club hosted me for lunch the following Sunday. Alone this time, reviewing acquisition proposals for 2 new beachfront properties while enjoying their excellent Eggs Benedict. I kept Dad's gold cross pen from that infamous brunch. It sits on my desk now as a reminder that sometimes the most valuable signature is the one you don't give. Sometimes the best family investment is knowing when to protect your assets from family. The ivory silk tablecloth gleamed under the crystal chandeliers as my sister Victoria's wedding reception reached its crescendo of celebration. I sat hidden behind an enormous floral arrangement, positioned at what the wedding planner had diplomatically called a more intimate table setting. Translation: far enough from the main party that my steroid-induced weight gain wouldn't ruin the professional wedding photos. Victoria looked radiant in her $8,000 designer gown, accepting congratulations from the 200 guests who had gathered to celebrate her marriage to Bradley, a corporate lawyer whose family owned half the commercial real estate downtown. The reception was everything she'd dreamed of: elegant, expensive, and completely centered around her vision of perfection. What didn't fit that vision was me, her older sister, dealing with the visible effects of 6 months of cancer treatment. "Oh darling, you look so much better than I expected," my Aunt Patricia whispered as she stopped by my table, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "Victoria was worried you might be too sick to attend, but here you are." I adjusted the silk scarf covering my bald scalp, a result of the aggressive chemotherapy regimen I'd been enduring for stage 2 breast cancer. The steroids prescribed to manage treatment side effects had caused significant weight gain and facial swelling, making me barely recognizable compared to my pre-diagnosis appearance. "I wouldn't miss Victoria's special day," I replied quietly, though the truth was I'd been dreading this event for weeks. My cousin Jennifer leaned over from the adjacent table. "It's so brave of you to come out in public like this. I mean, with everything you're going through, your little problem and all." The phrase "little problem" stung. That's how my family had been referring to my cancer diagnosis for months, as if stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma was equivalent to a mild inconvenience rather than a life-threatening disease requiring intensive treatment. "Victoria is being so understanding about everything," Patricia continued. "She even rearranged the seating chart to accommodate your situation. Very thoughtful of her to put you somewhere comfortable." By comfortable, she meant hidden. I was seated at the back corner table behind a wall of gladiolus and baby's breath, strategically positioned so that my appearance wouldn't detract from the wedding photos or upset guests who might find cancer treatment effects disturbing. From across the room I could see Victoria holding court at the head table, regaling her bridesmaids with animated stories. Every few minutes she would glance in my direction with an expression that mixed pity with mild irritation, as if my presence was a necessary inconvenience she was graciously tolerating. The DJ's voice boomed across the reception hall. "Ladies and gentlemen, we're about to begin the toast presentations. First, we'll hear from the bride's sister, Emma." I watched my younger sister Emma approach the microphone, her maid of honor dress a perfect shade of blush pink that complemented her naturally glowing complexion. She looked everything I used to look like before cancer treatment transformed my appearance. "When Victoria first told me about this wedding," Emma began, "she was so excited about creating the perfect day. She wanted everything to be beautiful, elegant, and memorable for all the right reasons." The guests murmured appreciatively as Emma continued her carefully rehearsed speech. "Of course, we've all had our challenges this year," Emma said, her eyes flickering toward my table. "Some family members have been dealing with personal issues that have been difficult for everyone. But Victoria has shown such grace in handling these distractions while planning her dream wedding. My heart sank as I realized that my cancer diagnosis was being framed as a distraction from Victoria's wedding planning rather than a serious medical crisis requiring family support. Victoria has been so patient with family members who haven't been able to participate fully in the wedding preparations due to their health situations, Emma continued. She's accommodated everyone's limitations with such understanding, even when it meant making compromises about her special day. The implication was clear. My cancer treatment had somehow inconvenienced Victoria's wedding plans, and she deserved praise for tolerating my limitations, rather than condemnation for treating my illness as a personal affront. Jennifer leaned over again. It really is amazing how Victoria has handled everything with Rebecca's situation. I know it's been hard on the whole family having someone going through, well, all of that during such a happy time. All of that was chemotherapy, radiation planning, multiple surgeries, and the constant terror of potentially dying before my 35th birthday. But in the context of Victoria's wedding year, my fight for survival had been reframed as an unwelcome drama that threatened to overshadow her celebration. The most painful part was that this attitude wasn't new. From the moment I'd shared my diagnosis 8 months ago, my family had treated my cancer as an inconvenience rather than a crisis. When I'd asked Victoria to postpone the wedding so I could complete treatment without the added stress of wedding obligations, she'd accused me of being selfish and trying to steal her thunder. When I'd requested accommodations for my treatment schedule, asking to be excused from certain pre-wedding events that conflicted with chemotherapy appointments, my mother had suggested I was using cancer as an excuse to avoid family responsibilities. As Emma concluded her toast to enthusiastic applause, I noticed a commotion near the reception hall entrance. Several people in professional attire were speaking with the venue coordinator, their serious demeanor contrasting sharply with the celebratory atmosphere of the wedding. My stomach dropped as I recognized Dr. Michael Chin, the chief of oncology at University Medical Center, among the group. Beside him stood Dr. Sarah Williams, the hospital's chief medical officer, and several other figures I recognized from the medical center's executive board. What were they doing here? The venue coordinator approached the head table and spoke quietly to Victoria and Bradley. I watched Victoria's expression shift from confused to annoyed as she gestured in my direction, clearly indicating that whatever this was about, it involved me. Dr. Chin began walking toward my table, his expression grave in a way that made my blood run cold. Behind him, the other medical executives followed, creating a solemn procession that was beginning to attract attention from nearby wedding guests. "Rebecca," Dr. Chin said quietly as he reached my table, "I apologize for interrupting the celebration, but we need to speak with you immediately. There's been a development with your case that requires urgent discussion." My Aunt Patricia looked confused. "Excuse me, but who are you? This is a private family event." Dr. Chin straightened, his voice taking on the authoritative tone he used for hospital presentations. "I'm Dr. Michael Chin, Chief of Oncology at University Medical Center. I've been overseeing Rebecca's cancer treatment for the past 8 months." The words, "Chief of Oncology," seemed to echo across the nearby tables, causing conversations to pause as guests processed what they were hearing. Dr. Williams stepped forward. "I'm Dr. Sarah Williams, Chief Medical Officer. We've been trying to reach Rebecca about her latest pathology results, but when she didn't respond to our calls, we became concerned about her welfare." Victoria appeared at the table, her wedding dress rustling with agitation. "Excuse me, this is my wedding reception. Whatever medical appointment Rebecca missed can surely wait until after my special day." Dr. Chen's expression hardened as he looked at Victoria. "Miss Thompson, your sister has been undergoing treatment for aggressive breast cancer. The results we need to discuss with her are time-sensitive and potentially life-saving. This cannot wait for social convenience." The nearby tables had gone completely quiet, guests straining to hear what was unfolding. "Furthermore," Dr. Williams added, "we're concerned about the stress environment Rebecca has been experiencing. Our social work team reported that family pressures were impacting her treatment compliance and emotional well-being." Victoria's face flushed red. "Family pressures? We've been nothing but supportive. We even accommodated her health issues by seating her appropriately and—" "Seating her appropriately?" Dr. Chin interrupted, his voice sharp with disapproval. "You mean hiding her behind plants because cancer treatment side effects might detract from your wedding photos?" The accusation hung in the air as more guests turned to stare at our table. Dr. Williams pulled out a tablet and began scrolling through notes. According to our records, Rebecca has missed 3 family therapy sessions we recommended because they conflicted with wedding-related obligations you insisted she attend despite her compromised immune system. Emma had joined the group, her maid of honor composure cracking. Look, we understand Rebecca is dealing with health issues, but this is Victoria's wedding day. Can't this medical stuff wait? Dr. Chen's response was ice cold. Rebecca is not dealing with health issues. She is fighting for her life against an aggressive cancer that has required intensive chemotherapy, radiation therapy, and multiple surgical interventions. The fact that you're referring to terminal illness as health issues that should accommodate social events is medically and ethically appalling. Dr. Chen gestured to his colleagues, who began setting up what appeared to be a mobile presentation system on a nearby table. Since Rebecca's family seems to misunderstand the severity of her condition, I think it's important to provide some medical education. Victoria looked panicked. You cannot turn my wedding reception into a medical lecture. This is completely inappropriate. What's inappropriate, Dr. Williams replied firmly, is a family that treats cancer as an inconvenience to their social calendar. Dr. Chen activated a tablet connected to a portable projector, and suddenly my medical scans appeared on the wall behind the head table. The entire reception hall could see the stark black and white images of my chest cavity, with tumors clearly visible even to untrained eyes. These are Rebecca's diagnostic scans from 8 months ago, Dr. Chen announced to the now silent reception hall. Stage 2 invasive ductal carcinoma with lymph node involvement. The tumor measured 4.2 centimeters at diagnosis. Gasps echoed across the room as guests finally understood the visual reality of what I'd been fighting. Dr. Williams stepped forward. Rebecca's treatment protocol has included 16 rounds of chemotherapy, 30 sessions of radiation therapy, and 2 surgical procedures. The side effects you've been treating as cosmetic inconveniences, the weight gain, hair loss, and fatigue, are the result of life-saving medical interventions. Victoria's face had gone pale. We didn't know it was that serious. Rebecca never explained because every time she tried to discuss her diagnosis, your family minimized it as personal issues or health problems, Dr. Chen replied sharply. Our social worker documented multiple instances where Rebecca was discouraged from discussing her cancer because it was bringing down the mood during wedding planning. He clicked to the next slide, showing my current scans. These are Rebecca's results from last week. The intensive treatment has been successful. We're seeing a 90% reduction in tumor mass and no evidence of metastatic spread. The room buzzed with murmurs of relief and confusion. However, Dr. Williams continued, what we discovered this week is even more remarkable. Rebecca's case has shown such exceptional response to treatment that we've been invited to present her outcomes at the International Breast Cancer Research Conference. She looked directly at Victoria. Your sister's treatment response has been so extraordinary that it's being studied by oncologists worldwide. She's not just surviving cancer, she's become a medical success story that could help save thousands of other women's lives. Dr. Chen pulled out another document. Furthermore, Rebecca has been selected for a clinical trial of a groundbreaking new treatment protocol. If successful, this trial could revolutionize breast cancer care. The research opportunity exists because of Rebecca's exceptional courage and compliance during treatment, despite facing family dismissal and isolation. My mother had appeared at the table, her face stricken with dawning understanding. We didn't realize. She seemed to be handling everything so well. She seemed to be handling it well because she's been protecting all of you from the reality of what she's experienced, Dr. Williams replied. Rebecca has been facing potential death while maintaining her job, managing treatment schedules, and accommodating family events that exposed her to infection risks during immunosuppression. Dr. Chen addressed the entire reception hall, his voice carrying the authority of decades of medical experience. I've been treating cancer patients for 25 years. I have never seen a patient demonstrate more courage, grace, and strength than Rebecca has shown while fighting for her life. And I have never seen a family treat a cancer patient's struggle as such an inconvenience to their social obligations. The silence that followed was deafening. Dr. Chen began packing up the medical equipment as the reception hall remained frozen in stunned silence. The wedding celebration had been completely transformed into a medical testimony about my fight for survival. A fight my family had dismissed as jealousy and attention-seeking. "Rebecca," Dr. Williams said gently, "we need you to come with us. The clinical trial coordinator is waiting to discuss your participation in the new protocol. This opportunity could change the trajectory of breast cancer treatment worldwide." Victoria stood helplessly in her wedding gown, finally understanding that her jealous sister was actually a medical phenomenon whose treatment response was significant enough to warrant international research attention. "The car is waiting outside," Dr. Chin added. "We'll have you back home later tonight, but this research opportunity has a narrow window for enrollment." As I stood to leave with the medical team, my family watched in silence. The elaborate wedding reception, the flowers, the champagne, the celebration of Victoria's perfect day, suddenly seemed trivial compared to the magnitude of what I'd been enduring alone. "Rebecca, wait," Victoria called out, her voice breaking. "I didn't know. We didn't understand how serious." I paused at the edge of the dance floor, looking back at the family who had treated my cancer as a social inconvenience rather than a life-threatening crisis. "You knew it was cancer," I said quietly. "You chose to treat it like jealousy instead of asking what you could do to help. You hid me behind plants because treatment side effects might ruin your photos. You called my fight for survival a little problem that was distracting from your special day." Dr. Chin placed a supportive hand on my shoulder. "Rebecca's courage during treatment has been extraordinary. She's been facing potential death while being accused by her family of seeking attention. That level of strength is why her case is medically remarkable." As we walked toward the exit, I heard the wedding guests murmuring among themselves, finally understanding that the woman they'd seen hidden behind flowers wasn't dealing with health issues or being dramatic. She was a cancer survivor whose treatment response was going to help save lives around the world. The irony was perfect. Victoria's wedding day, which was supposed to be all about her, had instead become the moment when everyone learned that her jealous sister was actually the most remarkable person in the room. They had wanted me hidden and silent during their celebration. Instead, they got a medical presentation that exposed their cruelty while revealing my extraordinary strength. The wedding they'd planned as Victoria's perfect day became the day when everyone learned that the real success story in the family had been fighting for her life while they worried about flower arrangements. As the car pulled away from the reception hall, I realized I was finally free from needing their approval or understanding. The medical community recognized my strength and significance in ways my family never would. The crystal chandelier cast warm light over our family's Christmas dinner as my brother Trevor carved the prime rib with ceremonial flair. The dining room table was laden with expensive dishes, lobster bisque, imported wines, truffle-stuffed potatoes, all purchased with money from what my family dismissively called my little government job. "So Trevor," my mother said, refilling her wine glass with the $200 bottle I'd bought, "tell everyone about your real estate closing this week. 6 figures in commission." Trevor beamed, adjusting his new Rolex, another purchase funded by my salary. The Henderson estate finally sold. I made more in one deal than most people see all year. My sister Madison nodded enthusiastically from across the table. "That's what I call real success. Not like some people who waste their education pushing papers in some obscure office." The barb was directed at me, of course. For the past 3 years, I'd been supporting my family's lavish lifestyle while enduring their constant criticism of my career choice. To them, I was just Sarah, the family disappointment who worked some vague administrative job in Washington, D.C. instead of pursuing real success like Trevor's sales career or Madison's lifestyle blog. "Speaking of which," my father said, setting down his fork with theatrical authority, "Sarah, when are you going to quit that dead-end position and get a real career? You're 31 years old. It's time to stop playing around with government work and do something meaningful with your life." I shifted uncomfortably in my chair, the secure phone in my jacket pocket vibrating with what I knew were urgent diplomatic communications. For the past week, I'd been managing a delicate crisis involving NATO allies and emerging threats in Eastern Europe. The situation required constant monitoring, even during family holidays. "My work is meaningful," I said quietly, taking a sip of the wine I'd purchased with my diplomatic salary. Trevor laughed dismissively. "Sarah, you work in some random office building doing paperwork. That's not a career. That's a placeholder until you figure out what you actually want to do with your life." My mother nodded in agreement. Your cousin Jessica just made partner at her law firm. Now that's impressive. When people ask what my daughter does, I'm embarrassed to say you're a government clerk. The irony was suffocating. While they mocked my clerk position, I was actually serving as Deputy Chief of Mission at the U.S. Embassy in Germany, the second highest-ranking American diplomat in one of our most critical European posts. My security clearance was higher than most senators, and I regularly briefed cabinet-level officials on international threats. But I'd learned long ago that my family had no interest in understanding the complexities of diplomatic service. To them, government work was synonymous with bureaucratic mediocrity. At least she has health insurance, Madison said with fake sympathy. Though I suppose that's all government jobs are good for. Basic benefits for people who can't handle real careers. My father leaned back in his chair, the same chair I'd helped them buy when they were facing foreclosure 2 years ago. Sarah, I'm going to be direct because someone needs to be. You're wasting your potential. You have an Ivy League education, you speak multiple languages, and you're throwing it all away on some dead-end bureaucratic position. It's not dead-end, I protested, though I knew they wouldn't listen. Please, Trevor scoffed. You've been there 3 years and you're still doing the same basic administrative work. Face it, Sarah, you're not management material. You're not cut out for real leadership positions. The condescension in his voice was particularly galling since Trevor's idea of leadership involved convincing elderly couples to downsize their homes for his commission. My mother reached over and patted my hand with theatrical concern. Sweetheart, we're only saying this because we love you. We want you to have the kind of success that Trevor and Madison have achieved. Real success that people can see and respect. Madison pulled out her phone to show pictures from her latest sponsored vacation. Look at what I accomplished this month. Brand partnerships with 3 major companies. That's what happens when you build a real career instead of hiding in some government basement. The government basement comment was particularly insulting since my office in the embassy overlooked the Brandenburg Gate, and I regularly hosted meetings with European Union officials and NATO commanders. Maybe you should consider going back to school, my father suggested. Get an MBA, learn some real business skills. I know it seems scary to leave the security of government work, but sometimes you have to take risks to achieve actual success. Trevor nodded sagely. Dad's right. You're playing it too safe, Sarah. Real careers require real risks. Look at me. I left corporate sales to start my own real estate business. That's what success looks like. My secure phone vibrated again, more insistently this time. I recognized the alert pattern. This was a priority flash message, the highest level of diplomatic communication. Something major was happening that required immediate attention from senior embassy staff. Excuse me, I said, standing from the table. I need to check my phone. See, Madison said to the table. Even on Christmas she's glued to that job. That's what happens when you don't have real career boundaries. My father shook his head disapprovingly. Sarah, put the phone away. Whatever paperwork emergency you think you have can wait until after Christmas. This is exactly the kind of unhealthy work-life balance that comes from dead-end government positions. But as I glanced at the message, my blood ran cold. The NATO Article 5 alert system was active, and I was being summoned for an immediate secure video conference with the Secretary of State. I stepped into the kitchen to read the full message, my heart pounding as I processed the severity of what was unfolding. Russian military units had crossed into NATO territory, and the alliance was activating emergency protocols for the first time in its history. As Deputy Chief of Mission in Germany, I was a key liaison for coordinating the European response. My secure phone rang immediately. The caller ID showed AMBG. Ambassador Harrison calling from the embassy. Sarah, thank God. Ambassador Harrison's voice was tense. How quickly can you get to the embassy? We need you here for the emergency NATO session. Sir, I'm with family for Christmas dinner. Can I participate via secure video from? Negative. This requires in-person presence in the SCIF. We're coordinating the largest NATO response since the Cold War. The President is flying to Germany tonight, and you're briefing him at 0600. My mouth went dry. Briefing the President of the United States on Christmas morning about a potential Article 5 situation was about as far from a dead-end government job as possible. I'll be there in 2 hours, I said, already calculating travel time. Sarah, one more thing. Ambassador Harrison's voice softened slightly. I know this ruins your holiday, but the secretary specifically requested you for this crisis team. Your work on the Eastern European threat assessments made you indispensable for this situation. As I ended the call, I could hear my family's laughter from the dining room, still celebrating Trevor's real estate success with wine I'd purchased using my diplomatic salary. I returned to the table to find them deep in conversation about Madison's latest Instagram collaboration. Sorry, I said, reaching for my purse. I need to leave. Something urgent has come up at work. My father rolled his eyes dramatically. Sarah, this is exactly what we're talking about. On Christmas Day? What kind of urgent paperwork could possibly require you to leave Christmas dinner? Trevor shook his head in disbelief. Let me guess. Someone needs you to file some forms? Sarah, this is why government work isn't a real career. Real professionals don't get called away from family holidays for administrative tasks. It's not administrative, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. It's a genuine emergency. Madison laughed. What kind of emergency? Did someone lose a filing cabinet key? Before I could respond, there was a firm knock at the front door. My stomach dropped as I heard multiple footsteps on the porch. I recognized the sound of security teams moving in formation. I'll get it, my father said, clearly annoyed by another interruption to his Christmas dinner. But as he opened the door, instead of finding neighbors or delivery personnel, he was faced with 4 men in dark suits wearing discreet earpieces. Good evening, the lead agent said, flashing his credentials. Special Agent Martinez, Diplomatic Security Service. We're here to escort Deputy Chief of Mission Chin to an emergency briefing. The words Deputy Chief of Mission hung in the air like an explosion. My father stared at the badge, then at the agents, then back at me. Deputy Chief of what? Agent Martinez stepped into the foyer, followed by his team. Ma'am, we have a helicopter standing by to transport you to the embassy. The ambassador is waiting for your arrival to begin the NATO emergency session. Trevor appeared behind my father, his face pale as he processed what he was hearing. NATO? Sarah, what's going on? But Agent Martinez was already briefing me on the situation. Ma'am, the crisis has escalated. Russian forces have engaged NATO units directly. The president has declared this Article 5 situation, and all senior diplomatic personnel are being activated for emergency response. Madison had joined the crowd at the door, her Instagram-perfect composure completely shattered. Sarah, who are these people? Why are they calling you Deputy Chief of Mission? My mother appeared last, still holding her wine glass. I don't understand. Sarah works in an office. She does paperwork. Agent Martinez looked confused, glancing between my family and me. Ma'am, your family doesn't know about your position? The question highlighted the devastating gap between my actual responsibilities and my family's perception of my career. Agent Martinez reached into his jacket and pulled out an official State Department communication device. Ma'am, I have Ambassador Harrison on secure line. He needs to brief you during transport. He handed me the device, and Ambassador Harrison's voice came through clearly enough for my stunned family to hear. Sarah, the situation has deteriorated rapidly. The president wants you personally handling the German Chancellor's coordination calls. Your threat assessment from last month was exactly right. Putin was testing NATO resolve, and now we're responding. My father's face had gone completely white. The president? The German Chancellor. Ambassador Harrison continued, unaware of my family's confusion. The Secretary of State specifically requested you for this crisis because of your expertise in Russian military doctrine. You're the only diplomat in Europe who correctly predicted this escalation pattern. Trevor stepped closer, his confidence completely evaporated. Sarah, who is this person calling you? What's really happening? Agent Martinez looked at me questioningly. Ma'am, do you want me to explain your position to your family? I nodded, too exhausted by years of their dismissal to explain myself. Your sister serves as Deputy Chief of Mission at the United States Embassy in Berlin, Agent Martinez said with professional authority. She's the second highest-ranking American diplomat in Germany, responsible for coordinating all U.S.-German relations and serving as the primary liaison between NATO headquarters and the White House. The silence that followed was deafening. Agent Martinez continued, DCM Chin has been managing the current crisis for the past week, including direct communications with the German Defense Ministry, NATO's Supreme Allied Commander and the National Security Council. She has top-secret/SCI clearance and regularly briefs cabinet-level officials on European security threats. Madison's wine glass slipped from her hand, shattering on the hardwood floor they'd renovated using my salary. Furthermore, Agent Martinez added, DCM Chen's annual salary is $180,000, not including diplomatic allowances and security benefits. Her position requires Senate confirmation and direct appointment by the president. My mother sank into the foyer chair, finally understanding the source of the money that had been funding their lifestyle for years. Agent Martinez's radio crackled. Sir, the helicopter pilot is reporting we need immediate departure. Weather conditions are deteriorating. Ambassador Harrison's voice came through the device again. Sarah, I hate to pressure you, but we have NATO allies waiting for your threat assessment. The Chancellor specifically asked for you by name. My father found his voice first. Sir, we had no idea. Why didn't you tell us? I tried, I said, moving toward the door with the security team. But every time I mentioned my work, you dismissed it as paperwork and government bureaucracy. You were more interested in spending my salary than understanding how I earned it. Trevor looked physically ill. But you never said you were. I mean, we thought you were just an administrative assistant or something. You never asked, I replied. For 3 years, you've been living off my diplomatic salary while telling me to get a real career. You've been wearing clothes, eating food, and living in a house maintained by money from the dead-end government job. You've been mocking. Agent Martinez gestured toward the door. Ma'am, we really need to move. The president's security team is already en route to Berlin. As I walked toward the waiting vehicles, my family followed helplessly onto the porch. The president is coming to Berlin, my mother whispered. He's coming because your daughter is one of the most important diplomatic figures in Europe, Agent Martinez explained. DCM Chen has been preventing this crisis from escalating to full military conflict for the past week. NATO commanders trust her assessment of Russian intentions more than most generals. The black SUVs pulled away from my family's house, leaving them standing on the porch in their Christmas finery, finally understanding the magnitude of what they'd been dismissing for years. Through the rear window, I could see them staring after the convoy, probably for the first time grasping that their daughter wasn't a low-level government clerk, but one of America's senior diplomats. My secure phone buzzed with messages from NATO headquarters, the German Foreign Ministry, and the White House Situation Room. Each notification represented the weight of international crisis management that I'd been handling while my family mocked my career choice. Agent Martinez handed me a briefing folder marked, Top Secret/FBI. Ma'am, these are the latest intelligence assessments. The helicopter will give you 20 minutes to review before we reach the embassy. As I opened the folder containing satellite imagery and threat analyses that would determine NATO's response to potential World War III, I thought about Trevor's real estate commission and Madison's Instagram partnerships. Their real success suddenly seemed microscopic compared to the responsibility of preventing international conflict. My phone rang with a call from the Secretary of State's office. The crisis required immediate diplomatic intervention, and I was one of the few people in the world qualified to provide it. When I returned to my family, if I returned, everything would be different. They could never again dismiss my career as meaningless paperwork or suggest I needed to find real work. The security clearance, the presidential briefings, the NATO crisis management, all of it was now undeniably real. But more importantly, they would have to face the truth about where their comfortable lifestyle had actually come from. Every expensive dinner, every luxury purchase, every bill I'd helped them pay had been funded by the dead-end government job they'd spent years ridiculing. The helicopter lifted off into the winter night, carrying me toward an embassy where world leaders were waiting for my assessment of international threats. Behind me, my family was left to process the reality that their unsuccessful daughter was actually one of the most important diplomatic figures in the Western Alliance. They had wanted me to get a real career, never realizing I was already living one that most people could never imagine reaching. Now they would spend the rest of their lives knowing they had dismissed genuine importance while depending on its financial rewards. The irony was perfect. While they'd been celebrating Trevor's single real estate sale, their sister had been preventing World War III. The mahogany dining table groaned under the weight of Mom's elaborate Thanksgiving spread, heritage turkey, truffle stuffing, and wines that cost more than most people's monthly rent. I sat at the far end, quietly cutting my food while my family discussed their latest luxury acquisitions, all funded by what they believed was their inherited wealth but was actually my personal fortune. "Ashley, darling, you really should contribute more to the household expenses," Mom said, dabbing her lips with a silk napkin. "Your brother's yacht maintenance alone costs $15,000 monthly, and we can't expect him to sacrifice his lifestyle just because you're struggling financially." I looked up from my plate, keeping my expression neutral. At 29, I'd perfected the art of appearing unremarkable while my family spent millions of my dollars on toys and status symbols. What Mom didn't realize was that Kevin's yacht maintenance came directly from my investment accounts, along with every other expense that supported their lavish lifestyle. My brother Kevin laughed, swirling his $300 wine. "Poor sister must help the family, right? That's what family money is for." He gestured toward the harbor window where his latest acquisition, a 60-foot yacht named Golden Legacy, bobbed among other vessels owned by genuinely wealthy people. The irony was breathtaking. Kevin's yacht, purchased with my money, bore a name that perfectly captured their delusion about inherited wealth. They'd somehow convinced themselves that our middle-class family had suddenly come into massive generational money, when the reality was that my cryptocurrency investments and tech startup sales had generated over $50 million in the past 5 years. "Kevin's absolutely right," Dad agreed, refilling his crystal glass. "Your grandmother's estate was meant to benefit the entire family, not just one person hoarding resources. Poor Ashley seems to forget that family wealth comes with family obligations." The fictional grandmother's estate was their explanation for sudden riches, a comfortable lie that allowed them to spend my money without acknowledging its actual source. They'd created an elaborate mythology around inherited wealth to avoid confronting the uncomfortable truth that their despised poor sister was actually the family's only source of income. "Speaking of obligations," Mom continued, "we need $42,000 for the November house payment. The property taxes are due next week and the staff salaries can't wait." She spoke about $42,000 like it was pocket change, which it essentially was when someone else was paying. What she didn't mention was that their house payment was actually the mortgage on a $7 million estate they couldn't afford on their non-existent legitimate income. Uncle Richard, Mom's brother, raised his glass in a toast to family legacy and responsible wealth management. "It's wonderful to see Ashley finally contributing appropriately to maintaining our family's standard of living." The applause was polite but pointed. They'd spent months training me to accept my role as the family's reluctant financier, someone who needed constant social pressure to fulfill my obligations to relatives who'd supposedly inherited equal shares of mythical wealth. "Ashley works so hard at her little computer job," Kevin said with mock sympathy. "At least she can contribute something meaningful to the family, even if her career isn't as impressive as mine." Kevin's career consisted primarily of managing investments that didn't exist and attending social events funded by my actual business success. His most recent achievement was being featured in a yacht club magazine as an example of young wealth done right, an article that would be particularly amusing when the truth about his finances became public knowledge. "What's your contribution this month, Ashley?" Mom asked with the tone she'd used to request a small favor. "We've been very patient about the delayed transfers, but the December yacht insurance is due and Kevin's planning that charity regatta." The charity regatta would cost approximately $200,000 and benefit exactly no one except Kevin's social standing. But questioning such expenses would only earn me another lecture about family responsibility and the importance of maintaining their community reputation. "I'll handle the transfer tomorrow," I said quietly, cutting another piece of turkey. "You're such a good sister," Kevin said, patting my shoulder condescendingly. "Even if you're not as successful as the rest of us, at least you're generous with what little you have." Tomorrow's bank meeting would provide an excellent opportunity to clarify exactly who had what in our family's financial arrangement. The forensic accountants had been documenting their spending patterns for months, and their report would make fascinating reading for everyone involved. The rest of Thanksgiving passed in familiar patterns. Kevin regaled everyone with stories of yacht club politics and upcoming regattas, while Mom detailed her plans for redecorating their estate with furnishings that cost more than most people's houses. Dad discussed his investment portfolio and business ventures, with the confidence of someone who'd never questioned where his money actually originated. "Ashley, you should really consider moving back into the family estate," Mom suggested over dessert. "You're wasting money on that little apartment when we have plenty of space here. Plus, it would make the monthly transfers more convenient." The suggestion was presented as maternal concern, but I recognized the underlying calculation. Having me on site would ensure their personal ATM was always accessible, and eliminating my rent payments would free up more money for their luxuries. "I appreciate the offer, but I value my independence." "Independence is overrated when family needs support," Kevin added. "Besides, grandmothers will specifically mention keeping the family together. We should honor her wishes about shared prosperity." The non-existent grandmother's will was constantly evolving to justify their latest financial demands. According to their mythology, she'd been a shrewd investor who'd left detailed instructions about family wealth distribution. Instructions that always seemed to require me funding their lifestyle choices. Over the following weeks, their spending reached new heights. Kevin ordered a second yacht for winter sailing, Mom purchased a collection of rare art pieces, and Dad invested in a private jet share that would cost more annually than most people earned in a lifetime. Each purchase came with elaborate justifications about family legacy, investment wisdom, and maintaining social standing. They'd convinced themselves they were responsible stewards of inherited wealth rather than adults spending someone else's money on toys. "The art collection is really an investment," Mom explained during one of our weekly dinners. "These pieces will appreciate significantly, and it's important for the family to have culturally significant assets." The culturally significant assets included a minor Picasso sketch that cost $800,000 and would hang in her bedroom where exactly 3 people would ever see it. But questioning the purchase would only trigger lectures about my failure to appreciate fine art and family heritage. "Kevin's yacht expansion makes perfect sense too," Dad added. "The charter business has tremendous potential, and having multiple vessels increases our market opportunities." Kevin's charter business existed only in their imagination, but planning meetings about non-existent customers filled several hours weekly and provided excellent justification for yacht-related expenses. The cognitive dissonance was remarkable. They lived in a world where I was simultaneously too poor to merit respect and wealthy enough to fund their fantasies without limits. In their minds, I was the family's administrative assistant, useful for handling financial details but not important enough to involve in spending decisions. "Ashley handles all the boring money stuff," became Kevin's standard explanation when friends asked about funding sources. "She's good with numbers and paperwork, so we let her manage the inheritance details while we focus on actually enjoying life." The boring money stuff included generating every dollar they spent, but acknowledging that reality would shatter their comfortable fiction about inherited wealth and family hierarchy. What made their behavior particularly galling was how they'd rewritten our family history. When I'd started sharing my business profits 5 years ago, it was supposed to be temporary support during Dad's career transition. But temporary had become permanent and gratitude had become entitlement. They'd convinced themselves they were successful people managing inherited wealth, while I was merely the useful sibling who handled mundane tasks like paying bills and managing investments. The truth, that every luxury they enjoyed came from my business success, was too threatening to their self-image to acknowledge. Tomorrow's meeting with the bank president would provide an excellent opportunity to clarify these financial relationships once and for all. The executive conference room at First National Bank commanded respect with its panoramic city views and handcrafted furnishings. As the principal account holder responsible for over $50 million in assets, I warranted the personal attention of President Margaret Chin and her senior staff. What my family didn't know was that I'd requested this meeting specifically to address their spending patterns, which had reached levels that triggered federal reporting requirements and internal fraud alerts. When someone with no legitimate income spends millions annually, banks notice. "Ms. Ashley Morrison," President Chin began, spreading documents across the polished conference table, "we've completed the forensic accounting review you requested regarding your family's financial activities." I'd invited my family to attend this routine portfolio review, describing it as an opportunity to optimize their investment strategies and discuss inheritance planning. They'd arrived expecting to learn about trust fund distributions and tax planning, not to confront mathematical impossibilities in their spending patterns. Mom sat confidently in her designer suit, prepared to discuss her art investments and estate planning. Dad adjusted his Rolex, ready to explain his business ventures and portfolio performance. Kevin checked his phone, expecting a brief meeting before his yacht club appointment. Before we begin, President Chin continued, I should clarify that this review was commissioned by Ms. Morrison to analyze the financial relationships and spending patterns within your family unit. The temperature in the room seemed to drop as they processed this information. Our forensic analysis reveals some fascinating patterns, President Chin said, activating the presentation screen. Over the past 5 years, this family has maintained a combined lifestyle costing approximately $2.8 million annually, luxury real estate, multiple vehicles, yacht purchases, art collections, travel, and miscellaneous expenses. Charts and graphs appeared on screen, documenting every aspect of their consumption with banking-level precision. Mr. Kevin Morrison has no documented employment or business income. Mr. David Morrison's consulting firm shows revenue of approximately $35,000 annually. Mrs. Catherine Morrison has no recorded income source. The numbers hung in the air like an indictment. Their spending exceeded their income by roughly $2.7 million annually. This creates an obvious mathematical problem. How does a family with essentially no legitimate income maintain expenses approaching $3 million annually? Dad cleared his throat nervously. Well, there's the inheritance from Catherine's mother, and my investment returns have been quite substantial. President Chen's smile was professionally devastating. Our investigation found no evidence of any inheritance, investment returns, or business income sufficient to support these expenditures. However, we did discover the actual funding source. New documents appeared on screen: detailed transaction records, account transfers, business income statements. 5 years of financial data traced with forensic precision. Every expense supporting your family's lifestyle. Every mortgage payment, yacht purchase, art acquisition, and luxury expenditure originates from accounts controlled by Ms. Ashley Morrison. Her cryptocurrency investments and technology company sales have generated over $53 million since 2019. The silence was absolute. 5 years of assumptions crumbling as they confronted documentation that couldn't be dismissed. Ms. Morrison has personally funded your entire lifestyle while you've treated her as the family's unsuccessful member. The monthly transfers you've received averaged $230,000, money you've apparently convinced yourselves came from non-existent inheritance. President Chin turned to address my family directly. The sister you've called Poor Ashley has been your sole source of income for 5 years. Without her financial support, you would be homeless within 60 days. Kevin's face had gone pale. That's impossible. Ashley works some computer job. The money comes from grandmother's estate. There is no grandmother's estate. There are no investment returns. There are no business profits. Every dollar you've spent came from Ms. Morrison's technology ventures while you dismissed her achievements as insignificant. The truth was finally exposed. No more pretending to be the family's financial burden while funding their delusions of inherited wealth. The aftermath was immediate and devastating. Within minutes of President Chen's presentation, my family's entire understanding of their situation had collapsed. The sister they dismissed as Poor Ashley was revealed as their sole financial lifeline, while their supposed wealth was exposed as complete fiction. I terminated all family accounts that evening. Credit cards were canceled, automatic transfers stopped, and access to my funds immediately revoked. 5 years of unlimited spending ended with a few electronic transactions. The consequences were swift and merciless. Kevin's yacht was repossessed within a week when the payments stopped. Mom's art collection went to auction to cover outstanding debts. Dad's private jet share was canceled for non-payment. The $7 million estate they couldn't actually afford went into foreclosure when the mortgage company realized the payments had been coming from accounts they no longer controlled. Within 30 days, my family went from millionaire lifestyle to genuine homelessness. Kevin tried calling repeatedly, his voice progressing from confusion to anger to desperate pleading as reality set in. Ashley, this is insane. You can't just cut off the family inheritance. Grandmothers will specifically. There is no grandmother, Kevin. There is no inheritance. There never was. Every dollar you've spent for 5 years came from my business success while you called me the family failure. The silence stretched as he processed 5 years of lies dissolving into mathematical impossibility. Mom's reaction was more complex. Tearful apologies about misunderstanding my contributions, followed by desperate attempts to negotiate partial funding for basic necessities, like the mortgage on a mansion she'd never owned. Dad simply couldn't accept the new reality. Even as he packed belongings from a foreclosed estate, he insisted there must be accounting errors, missing trust documents, or legal challenges that would restore their fictional wealth. They attempted various reconciliation strategies: family therapy suggestions, holiday guilt trips, medical emergencies that required financial assistance. But I'd learned the most important lesson about family dynamics. People who treat your generosity as their entitlement don't deserve either. Within 6 months, the transformation was complete. Kevin found work at a yacht club, not as a member but as maintenance staff earning minimum wage. Mom discovered that retail employment was considerably less glamorous than art collecting. Dad learned that actual consulting work paid far less than imaginary investment returns. Their former social circle, built entirely on perceived wealth, evaporated when they could no longer afford club memberships and charity donations. The community standing they'd prioritized over family relationships disappeared along with their ability to fund it. My cryptocurrency portfolio continued generating substantial returns. The technology patents I'd developed provided ongoing royalty income. The business success they'd dismissed as unimportant sustained the lifestyle they could never actually afford. The bank president's report sits framed in my home office now, a reminder that financial truth matters more than family mythology. Success isn't determined by spending patterns but by actual income generation. And sometimes the most important audit reveals not accounting fraud, but emotional deception that's lasted far too long. Family obligations are real, but they flow both ways. When relatives treat your success as their inheritance while dismissing your achievements, they've forfeited any claim to ongoing support. Truth, unlike inherited wealth, actually exists, and it's the only asset that can't be spent.